If you're not willing to do that, are you going to pick up the extra paper in the community? Are you going to talk a little extra to that little kid? What are we going to do? Because God says when you do more for him, he's going to triple what he do for you. But you can't do it. I don't believe you can do it for the sake of what God's going to do for you tomorrow. You do it for the sake of what you just believe that that's your obligation and responsibility. Because if we go back to the Bushido book, it talks about your duty as a black belt. All those things are there just because we know that we have to build our character so we can build the next generation. How many people feel those moments today? Not much, do you? But how many people believe if you had that sort of awareness right now in this state of society, that a lot of things wouldn't get by? How many people realize the guy that walks in that doesn't really look so cool, and we always talk about it when he walks through the door like that during class? He just don't look right. He smells a little different. He's looking a little. I hate to pass judgment on you, but I just gotta. You out of sync. You're not in the flow of the people, so therefore I gotta go to you. Remember we talked about that? That's what we train it for. That sort of alertness, that sort of awareness. We have to do that for our children. We have to give them this, and then I know it's sad that we come to that point, you know, in the midst of all, and I'm like, and I read that because I'm saying, that's why Point MMA was discovered, those tools. When we sit there letting Messiah roll around with Johnny, we want Messiah to learn how to not get mad and get upset. We looking for his facial. We want to see Messiah be courageous and think and move and figure out how he's going to work this pressure out. Because just like Master Hilal Cho said, if you can get them to do it right there under that sort of non-stop pressure, then they're going to be able to do it when regular life comes their way. If when they doing the cardio stuff and they about ready to panic, and he says that, he said it's all about skill and cardio. If you don't have skill in cardio, you can't be a great fighter. Fatigue make cowards of us all. Fatigue, cardiovascular. When we got them people jumping, that's why you got to challenge yourself to the max. You got to watch the student challenge themselves to the max, and you want to see how they're going to respond. We challenged Messiah to the max this morning, and he responded just right. He showed up. That's all, sometimes that's all you can do. That's what we got to be looking for in this school. We know that when you challenge them to the max, you develop a muscle memory, mental memory, spiritual memory, where guess what? You will never have to tell them what to do under pressure again. Their muscles will naturally do it. All what I'm sharing with you is spiritual and mental memory that somebody instilled in me. You don't have to tell me what to do. Because when I'm not saying there's nothing bad going on in the school. It's just it's an opportunity to figure out what can we do to better prepare our children. The guy at the gym, I mean, people crying. The guy at the gym, we talking, he's like, man, all I wanted to do was go, I just had to get off from work and stay early and go hug my kid. I had to go hug my baby. It was more people picking up their children yesterday than any time I was at a school. Even us. Everybody better prepare our children. You came up in an era where your mom, where your parents, and you're a lot older than me, but I know your parents said, look, you must stay away from little Mr. Johnny. Mr. Johnny don't look right. We don't know where Mr. Johnny lives at. There's something wrong with Mr. Johnny. And if I see Mr. Johnny or you around Mr. Johnny, I'm going to whip both of y'all behinds. Now you stay away from Mr. Johnny. And then every time Mr. Johnny came around, like, yo, hurry up, right or wrong. But you don't want to tell them the difference. It ain't being judgmental, but they're honest, innocent people. You got to give them visions and examples of what goes on. I mean, we laugh and joke. Eddie Murphy talks about it. The difference is in the hood, when the gunfire goes off, everybody runs and ducks. In the suburbs, when the gunfire goes off, everybody stops and looks and says, where's that coming from? Am I right or wrong? But we take it for granted. That's the truth. So we need to realize that survival instinct that goes on in that inner city that we neglect, they already been going through it for years and years. We find a way to make sure that every week we teach a class, and especially Point MMA, we teach them something about character building. Because until you build up their own character, they can't stand up for something. If the honesty and the openness and the faith and all those things that the complete martial artist has talked about, if we are not really instilling those things within those children, 1 week and being consciously reminding them of the principle that we're talking about, then the kid is lost. How many times we revisit? Are you being honest? Are you really being honest? When we tell them, did you do that punch right? I'm turning my back. So did you really punch right when I turned my back? Tell me the truth. Are you getting in his face and saying, tell me the truth? No, sir, I didn't. Well, I need you to do it right when I turn my back. When the kid do it right when you turn your back, you drilling the truth. But if you don't pay attention to it, then the kid's confused because they don't know what the truth is. Am I making sense? So then you got the other week when we talking about basic sparring principles. Defending, moving, angling, getting out the way, being aware of blocking and punching at the same time, all those little things that we know. Champions always be prepared with their equipment. Champions having the right uniform on, having the right weapon on, having the right whatever. If you miss one point of preparing them to be able to go into combat, which is that sparring situation, and you let them get away with one, it'll begin to go down and down and down. We have to be consistent on teaching those principles. You got to make sure that it's, and you know, and I know it sounds crazy, but it makes a lot of sense. If you got everybody in the same equipment, it teaches us to be aware of everybody being on the same team, which goes back to combat. If there's somebody walking in a place where we all dress, and even the guy in the hood knows it, look, yo, if I'm at a club and they say suits only, and you got a guy coming into the door with bags, dragging it, you don't let him in. He ain't dressed appropriately. But there's always a fool to say, all right, that's Johnny, man, let him in. Was something wrong if Johnny knew that you said come in suit, and he came in baggy pants and Timbers and a hoodie on? Something wrong. But because he's Johnny, you let him go, right? You can't let him go. That's the same thing on the floor. You see that mom or dad coming in a certain way, you got to get familiar with the moment. Even a drug dealer knows, keep him moving one way, come through this door. If you come that door, bust him up, beat him down, keep him moving one way. And when one parent comes in and they sitting up on the wall, like, I know it sounds crazy, but one parent sitting right here, leaning on the wall right there, you never know, it might be somebody else coming in behind him trying to do something. It might be a dad who's frustrated with his kid, and his wife already divorced him. And he coming in, he just looking at his kid, looking at his wife standing right there, because you let him break the rule, you don't sense nothing else gonna happen. But what happens is that when you say have a seat, because we don't allow people to stand in the walkway, and he challenges you, oh, sign goes up. Because if you don't want to follow the flow up the rules that everybody do, then you got to begin to figure out what we're going to do. This is uncomfortable. Let me start removing him. And you change the whole dynamic, possibly. There's no guarantees, but we need to do it on a day-to-day basis now. We just got to try something. We got to try these things that don't come from me, but I know that there are things that most criminals and most people in militaries and all these units have used to kind of like avoid certain situations. But there's still no guarantees. And in the third week, we should, it's self-defense week. Shouldn't we be talking to them about being aware of their surroundings? But what is your surroundings? What is surroundings, sir? I don't know. I used to teach martial arts, and I used to always say we teach confidence, self-esteem, and focus. I didn't even know what they was until I went to jail. I just got into the habit of saying the words over and over. Most people who graduated from college saying certain words don't even know what they are. Because we don't even pick up the dictionary no more. It wasn't until the guy said, no, look it up in the dictionary. You look it up like, oh, okay, now I understand it. So have we ever stopped for a minute and thought ourselves, what is being aware of our surroundings? And if you look, and I go again, well, how many people really got conscious? Most people didn't. Because we think combat is all physical. The fight starts in the preparation. Long Sword in the Art of War said the battle is already won before you go into battle. It's won at the strategy table. Once you do all that, you might not even have to go and physically fight. Well, if you do the same thing with your own conscious intellect, you done already prevented it from happening. You can sense it before it even goes. That's why these things are so important to instill in our kids. being aware of our surroundings, taking charge of your body language. The reason why it pisses me off so much when somebody's in class, they just choose to punch. You got to take charge of your punch. Suck it up. Punch. Stop trying to get somebody to force you to take charge. That's what we're trying to teach a kid. In a quick second, he can snap out of it and get himself together just like he did this morning. In a quick second, the little kid that's like moving around and doing whatever, you can snap him out of it and get himself together. But if you can't, and let's think about on a combative level, a guy just came in with a gun and said, I'm going to kill everybody in here. You know and you can sense because you don't put bad things in your system. But if you do put lying, you put drugs, alcohol, all those things in your system, you can't be conscious of the truth that's going on because your senses are like confused. But when it's none of that stuff in you, and you're working out, you're eating right, and you're being positive, oh, your senses are like vibrating to whatever's wrong. You can sense it before it even happens. So you can sense he's going to pull the trigger even if you give him the money. You got to strategically figure out what you're going to do to adapt and grow and flow within that situation to make them change your state of mind. That's the same thing with teaching. That's why I can't nobody teach you that. I can teach you all the principles of combat all I want. But when that combat comes, you got to figure out it's going to come naturally to you, to how you are able to adjust and adapt. Well, I believe that's the same thing with leadership. That's why you should be never lost in adjust and never let them know that you're afraid of it. Because that's a fear that you got to get past. Because if you never learn to get past it, adults are just big kids. We all have those emotions. So all those things that come to our consciousness, it is meant for us to work on them. And when we work on them, we begin to become a masterpiece of success. We will never be perfect, but we will become closer and closer to becoming a much better and more balanced person. And then guess what? You'll be able to control all those situations. Mr. Raymond got it now. That's why he can teach, and we don't even have to come out and tell him what to do now. Because he learns how to adapt and adjust to every little kid. He learns the words and how to say it. The same thing with Mr. Owens, but even Mr. James. That's why he's here now. That's how he said he's a role model, man. And that's why it's so important for us to hold on to those truths and those principles and teach them in every class. Remembering that all those things are what makes the kick good. Miss Kimber can kick real good, but the one thing about it, Miss Kimber always been a good person. If you ever seen Miss Kimber back at tournaments, she was always a person that you just wanted to say hi to. You wanted to be around. She was a good person. She probably didn't say much, but the same way she executed that traditional form was the same person that you've seen in her presence. Those are the things that we lack in society. We forget the whole value. We forget to remind our children of those little things. Sometimes we forget to remind ourselves. That's why we got to make sure that we've got to remember what we're teaching here. We're teaching exactly what they taught me, good character.
I've had a lot to do with, trying to revise and, write different pieces of things. And it's not, this is just a good point. It's kind of like a wake up that a lot has to happen. And, everything he said, about, if you take what happened yesterday, that wouldn't happen if that person had the type of influences that are here in the school. Like whether it was a martial arts school, whether it was a football camp, whether it was, an older brother or parents or community center or whatever it was, that, I'm almost positive it wouldn't have happened. And I don't even know what happened, within that person to make them do that. But, and I think out of everything that happened yesterday, the thing that kind of struck me the most was I was watching something, I think it was CNN, and they were interviewing he was a former deputy director of the FBI, and I forget the exact question, but the Wolf Blitzer asked him, hey, will this happen, or can we stop this from happening? And like without even a half a second, he was like, no, this is going to happen again. And the reason he said was, things like 9/11, the Columbine shooting, all those things, we treat it like it's, too painful to talk about, and, there's, this isn't a good time to discuss, how we correct this or how we deal with this type of stuff. So, we wait, and then by the time it is right, everyone's forgotten about it and they don't care. And just when he said that, that really made a lot of sense to me. And I'm sure that point's lost on a lot of people, but